It's scary. It's a scary movie.
It's a horror movie for children.
If you like The Wizard of Oz, stay away from this movie.
Dorothy Gale.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Gen X podcast.
A podcast sometimes hosted by two childhood best friends, always dedicated to the pop culture that raised us.
I'm Cate, a writer and a midwife, and that's our little dog Toto.
And I'm Lori, a writer and a pop culture lover.
Today we're taking you somewhere over the rainbow into the bowels of the Emerald City to revisit a fever dream from our youth.
Yes, Gen Xers, we hitch a ride on the Gump to join Dorothy and her misfit pals in Return to Oz, the dark fantasy adventure responsible for our collective childhood trauma.
But before we get into the wheelers, talking heads, and electroshock therapy of it all, we'd like to remind you that we have a Patreon.
Yes, for just $5 a month, you'll get access to one bonus episode a month. But more importantly, your money goes to supporting the pod. We're covering iconic TV episodes that range from Different Strokes and Family Ties to Beverly Hills 90210 and My So-Called Life. I think there's, maybe 16 or 17 episodes over there right now. So check it out on patreon.com/the Untitled Gen X podcast. But enough about all that. Return to Oz. Cate. Oh, Cate. Oh, dear Cate. What is your history with this film? Because, wow. And also, please remind me why we chose it. Because, oh my God.
Yeah. So I honestly, this film was very memorable for me, but only certain parts. Like the rest of it, it's as if it didn't even exist. And I think I only saw this movie once.
That was enough.
It was so wild that it just burned into my head. Why? I think we chose it because I had all these memories of it. And I think partly I was like, were those true? I'm not remembering this right. And no, I was remembering it right. And actually, it's even worse than I was remembering it. I blocked out some of the severe trauma.
Which is really saying something because my grandma took me to go see this movie. And I'll get into, my reaction with my grandma with certain scenes. And it was a tough one for me to get through in the theater. The rewatch, I was just sort of like, I understand why I was scared. Sometimes you go back and you revisit something that was really memorable or a little bit traumatic from your childhood. And you're just like, oh, I could see it, right? I could see why I was scared by that. But no, this, like you're saying, was so completely justified.
Yeah. So I enjoyed the rewatch. But as a kid, there are a few scenes that really stuck out to me and kind of terrified me. And I completely agree with that still. But as I was watching it, and when we get to the part in it that triggered this memory, I will explain it more thoroughly. But I realized that I have this strange connection to The Wizard of Oz personally. It's so weird. So more to come.
I love it. You're placing breadcrumbs. I'm here for it. I'm following your yellow brick road.
Foreshadowing.
I'm in for this journey.
I promise there will be no wheelers or flying monkeys.
Okay, well, this story with Return to Oz begins with author L. Frank Baum, who released the novel The Wonderful World of Oz in 1900. And over the next 20 years, he released 13 more Oz novels. In 1939, MGM released the smash hit, The Wizard of Oz, starring Judy Garland. And do you remember how network TV used to play The Wizard of Oz on one very special night a year? I feel like it happened maybe on Thanksgiving, but it was a big television event. I used to watch it every year as a kid. It was a big deal.
I have to make a confession.
No, don't tell me you haven't seen it.
Only seen The Wizard of Oz once all the way through, because on that very special night of the year when they would air it on TV, it didn't hold my interest. I couldn't. Wow. I could watch it up until they got sleepy in the poppies. And then I
Mm.
was kind of like, nah, and I would stop watching. And so I had, until maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, I finally was like, I have no idea how this movie ends.
So my husband, he had never seen The Wizard of Oz. He only saw it like maybe 10 years ago. I was horrified when I learned that. I'm like, sit down right now, family. We are going to watch this movie. The kids didn't really like it.
Like, I feel like it's very iconic in our culture. So of course I like had the general gist of the
Sure.
story. And I think I even knew that like it was all kind of a sham.
A sham.
It was all kind of a sham. No, I mean like
conspiracy.
like the wizard. I mean the
Right,
wizard.
okay.
That like that was a sham. Like
I was
but
like, oh, are you suggesting that Dorothy is hallucinating all of this, Katie?
no, but like I mean there were poppies. I'm just saying.
I mean, yeah, fair.
I did sit down and watch it, and I have to say I kind of feel like once is enough. Now, at the time that I saw Return to Oz the first time as a child, I don't think I'd seen it beyond the I mean, for sure, not beyond the poppies, but I don't even know that I've seen it. I'd seen it all that much.
That's so interesting because like I really wanted to go see this movie. I was a Wizard of Oz stan. I was like, yes, what is Dorothy up to? Let's follow Dorothy's adventure 6 months after all of this happened. I was invested in this journey for Dorothy.
Yeah, and I didn't realize, which sounds dumb, I didn't realize that the premise of this movie was that like the same Dorothy is going back
now
to
like
Oz.
10 years younger.
Right.
It's 6 months later, but she's like 10 years younger.
Right. I somehow thought that it was like a little girl from my time that went back to Oz.
That's a fun idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some reason, wait, you pronounce her name Fairuza Balk, right? Is that
Yes.
true? Okay. So for some reason in my memory, it was like a little version of the Fairuza Balk who was in The Craft in this movie.
She goes back with like witchcraft and
So
shit.
like it matched well with like the, headless things.
Sure.
But no, she's actually quite young and very uncraft.
Unwitchy. She's not a witchy
Yeah.
woman. Yes. No.
Yeah. So yeah, I somehow like missed that like the idea was that like, and maybe because I hadn't seen The Wizard of Oz at that point, that this was the same Dorothy going back to
We
the
are
place
returning. Hence, return to Oz.
Right, but I thought Return to Oz like me going back to Oz.
It's like Back to the Future in your DeLorean. Yes. It's actually Dorothy.
It's the Dorothy.
The one and only.
So
in 1954, Disney bought the film rights to the remaining Oz novels, but they didn't do anything with them. I had read that there were some things knocking around that like, okay, maybe we'll create an Oz adventure starring the Musketeers kind of a thing. I mean, sort of thank God they didn't do that because
right?
Way to sanitize it. Yeah. But in 1980, Walter Murch, who was interestingly this very, very accomplished film editor and writer and sound engineer. This guy won a bunch of Oscars. He was involved with like Apocalypse Now, All Three Godfathers, American Graffiti, but he wasn't really a director. He pitched Disney and was like, hey guys, I know you're going to lose the rights to these Oz novels pretty soon. Why don't we make a movie? And they were like, hey, we love it. Great idea. So Return to Oz is actually based on the second and third Oz books, The Marvelous Land of Oz from 1904 and The Ozma of Oz from 1907. And it is true. The vision of this film was much darker than we might expect from a Disney movie. And that was because it remained more faithful to the L. Frank Baum novels. So that was the intention. In fact, the tagline for the poster of this film says, it's an all-new live action fantasy filled with Disney adventure and magic. And I'm like, this is not Disney magic.
This is terrifying. This is like a Clockwork Orange magic. Like that's what it reminded me of.
No, it's true. So scary. So scary. But if you do a deep dive on Return to Oz, and I actually recommend that you all do, because wow, there's some great stuff written about this film. I found a great article on a site called Screen Crush, and they said Murch's script, co-written by Walk the Lines Gil Dennis, plays with the idea that Dorothy may indeed be hallucinating the entire thing, and it never gives a concrete answer. Where the original MGM classic made Oz look like a Technicolor piece of cinematic candy, Return to Oz makes Dorothy's second journey look more like a nightmare. And that is the God's honest truth.
Yeah, it's scary. It's a scary movie.
It's a horror movie for children.
So my brother, who, the pod knows, Pat, he guest stars here sometimes. He told me that there was a time in the 80s, around the time of the infamous Watchers in the Woods that terrified me as a child, where Disney kind of decided they needed to be more gritty. And so
sorry.
but it's like they took it to the just wild extreme. It's like, come on. You could have been a little more gritty without terrifying Gen X.
Oh no, and this movie, wow. So it was released on June 21st, 1985. They threw a shit ton of money at it. The budget was $28 million.
Wow.
But the movie only made $11.1 million.
Because I'm sure word got around to the Mommy and Me groups that this is a terrifying movie. Don't take your children.
Word on the street. Your kid's going to need therapy. And oh yeah, we don't really believe in therapy for children. So don't do it.
Right.
Oh my God. And this movie on opening weekend, it opened in 7th place behind Cocoon.
Oh, Cocoon. Have I ever seen Cocoon all the way to the end?
Honestly,
what is it about? It's about old people who go in swimming pools and come out young? What is it about? We have to do Cocoon. We have to do Cocoon.
Brimley in that film, who's the oldest man. He's older than dirt in that movie, is the same age as Paul Rudd, who drinks from the fountain of youth. So I don't even understand. Paul Rudd is the same age that Wilford Brimley was in that film.
How old is Paul Rudd?
I don't know, 54 or something like that. I don't know. Not that much older than us.
Why were people in their 50s so old when we were young? And I don't even mean like we were misinterpreting it. They seemed old because we were young.
I mean, there was that too, but
a picture of Wilford Brimley and a picture of Paul Rudd, and maybe not even Paul Rudd, someone else, because Paul Rudd is freakishly youthful.
Yeah, okay. Oh, Katie, I think we have to get into this film because we could talk around it all day long. There is just so much to say.
There's just no way but through.
Yes. All right. We open on Dorothy. She's a little girl. She's so much younger than Judy Garland's Dorothy.
She's so young, but she has braids and she lives in Kansas and she has a dog named Toto. So there you go.
Indeed.
That's all you need. All the context you need.
She can't sleep. She's got all these visions of Oz. All she ever does is talk about Oz and she can't sleep. And Auntie M's like, oh my God, Dorothy, you and Oz and your lack of sleep. This is a real problem. And then we see Uncle Henry looking very, very serious. He pulls out a newspaper clipping for a new sanitarium in town that specializes in electric healing. Cate, what a time to be alive.
What a time. Also, I was I have no idea what time period this is. It was 1899.
1899, yes. Aunt and uncle decide Dorothy needs serious help. It's time. And it's been 6 whole months since that whole inconvenient tornado ripped up their house and Dorothy started talking about Oz. She's talking about Tin Men and scarecrows and ruby slippers. And I can imagine for Auntie M, this is sort of like when you have young children and they won't shut up about Minecraft. It's all they talk about all the time. And it's this fantasy thing and you just don't care. Auntie M's enough, Dorothy. Enough.
It didn't happen. There is no Emerald City.
But I think we should take this moment to talk about casting for Dorothy and for Fairuza Balk.
Yes.
Okay, so Walter Murch, the director, the co-writer, he had very specific ideas about who he wanted Dorothy to be played by. And he said He, quote, wanted to find someone who might be Judy Garland's cousin once removed. So in 1983, young Fairuza Balk was chosen out of 600 girls from Vancouver to audition for the role of Dorothy in Los Angeles. And this was a very big deal. And when she learned that she nabbed the role, she said, I just burst with tears because I was so happy. It was a really big thing for me to even get an audition for a real feature film. So let's talk about not real feature films for a moment. Fairuza Balk stars in your favorite holiday classic, The Best Christmas Pageant Ever.
Right, which I never realized until this podcast went and revisited it.
Yes, and that was in, I believe, 1983. Cate and I covered it on season 1. Go back and listen to it. But producer Paul Maslansky said, Balk, quote, is Dorothy as described by Baum, the author. She is also Dorothy, as I think Judy Garland would have loved to play her if she were that age and not 25.
If she weren't a full-grown woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought she was great. I thought she did such a good job.
Oh my gosh, I did too.
And she does have a touch of resemblance to Judy Garland. Like,
I mean, I don't know about that, but like there is definitely something mystical in those eyes of hers.
yeah.
You know, and she grew up to sort of be more like, especially for films like The Craft and American History X and stuff like that, like sort of those eyes look almost a little sinister.
Right. She grew up to be much more edgy.
So. But like as a child, she really had like wonder in those bright blue eyes. And she was a great Dorothy. She was a great pick.
Yeah, she was great. I can't really imagine anyone else in that role making it, I don't know. It just
believable.
Right. Like, I mean,
so outrageous.
It was so outrageous, but I never felt like she was not buying into it. Right. And just like reading the lines.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Like she was there. She was in that nightmare Oz world and handling it shockingly well.
Yes. So, okay. The next morning, sometime later, whatever, she's outside doing chores in the yard and she finds a key with an Oz emblem on it.
But I mean, is it an Oz emblem? Because it looks like a don't smoke here emblem.
Did you actually see Oz in that?
I did when she pointed it out.
Okay,
but not,
I didn't.
I never, I mean, it's literally like that like circle with a slash through it that says don't do this here.
She actually traces the O-Z and then you're like, oh, okay. But like, would you have seen that if you found a key in your yard? Like, oh, this is a key that belongs to Oz.
No.
So Dorothy is so excited about this key. She shows it to Auntie M and Auntie M's like, oh, girl, that's the key to our old house. Calm down. Dorothy, you've got some issues. We've got to go to the doctor today. We got to see Dr. Worley. Let's go. So they take their horse and carriage and they go off to the doctor's.
It's a buggy.
A buggy. Is that different? Oh, a carriage is enclosed.
She just purposefully calls it a buggy. She's like, I rode a buggy all the way here and I didn't fall out.
Okay, so Dorothy tries to tell the doctor everything that happened in Oz, and he's like, oh, all that happened? I know what'll cheer you up. This electrical marvel of science, this giant ass machine. And like you said, it's $18.99. So this is the most intimidating contraption you could possibly imagine.
Right. I don't want to be connected to anything with electricity in it from 1899. Just no thanks. I'm good.
So in that machine, she spots the reflection of a blonde girl and the blonde girl waves to her, but then mysteriously disappears. So Dorothy might actually be losing her mind. Something's going on here. So Auntie M leaves her at the hospital. Like, bye.
Right. She's like, do everything the doctor and the head nurse say.
Right.
That sounds safe.
I'll be back in the morning. And the head nurse, wow, is she scary. She's dressed in all black. She's played by Jean Marsh, who was in Willow. She's good.
She's very good. And that dress with the like pointy shoulders.
Yes.
It's terrifying. But also, as a nurse, how could you possibly nurse in that outfit?
Well, I don't know that she was doing the nursing so much as the scary orderlies dressed in all white.
Right. Yeah, they were very creepy.
Yes. the scary head nurse takes her down this creepy hallway into like a patient room where Dorothy is soon joined by that young blonde girl who gives her a jack-o'-lantern. They have a little conversation and then the girl is gone.
Oh, that jack-o'-lantern is suddenly making so much more sense
Yes,
now.
yes.
Yeah. Do you know what I thought at first? I was like, who is this blonde girl? And I was like, wait, is she Alice in Wonderland? Like, are they doing electroshock therapy on all of these girls that have these fantastical adventures?
Now there's
like
a
that's
movie.
A whole other movie.
I was going to say, Cate, that is the movie we all want to see as adults.
Right.
Not as children.
Right? No, not as children, as adults. Like, what happened to them when they grew up?
That's a screenplay.
Can we be clear that this is my idea? Do not steal it.
Timestamp.
If you decide to write the screenplay, then I need the created by, like, inspired by something.
I think you deserve credit.
Right.
Okay, so there's a crazy storm brewing outside, and the nurse arrives and asks Dorothy if she wants to go for a ride. So the two scary orderly men hoist her up on this gurney and strap her down. How is she so calm?
Well, I mean, she's had quite some adventures in her young life at this point.
She's jaded. This is some real Gen X energy. Let me tell
right.
you. She never gets spun up about anything.
No, she's like, I mean, she gets a little upset, but then she composes herself.
Right.
She just gets shit done without a whole lot of adult supervision. Like, she's always the one, like, even the law, she has to wind up to make it work.
Mm-hmm. It's worth mentioning the creaking sounds on the wheels on the gurney.
Mm-hmm.
Pay close attention to those. Like, just tuck that away. We are going to revisit that. So Dorothy is wheeled into a room where the electromagic is going to happen, Cate. And the doctor's fiddling with the electroshock therapy settings and stuff. And the nurse places those like headphones to her head.
I know, but she puts them over her ears.
I know.
They do still use electroshock therapy, but it's way milder than it used to be. And so it does kind of look like headphones, but they put them over the temples.
Yes.
And then there's a mild electrical current that's run through them. But these are like metal and nothing to
They're
buffer.
like Air Max Pros.
Right. And she puts them over her ears. And I'm like, ow.
I'm going to blow out her eardrums, but that's cool. Yeah. So just as the doctor is about to pull the main switch to deliver those shock waves, a storm blows the power out. And patients start screaming, and Dorothy is able to escape because that mysterious girl patient shows up and helps her out.
Because she can't do anything because she's strapped to this table. Yeah.
So the head nurse, all of the other patients be damned, right? She chases after Dorothy and that girl, and it's pouring rain. It's crazy outside. They jump into a raging river before finding a crate that's just like making its way down this roaring rapid.
Well, no, first they find I think it's the top to like a wooden, maybe it's the top to the crate, to a wooden crate.
Oh, like the lid. Yeah. They're able to escape the nurse down that river, and Dorothy falls asleep. It's been a long night. She's tired.
She's been through a lot. She rode a buggy in the morning to get to this place. All this stuff happened.
Yeah, it's hard. And she wakes up in the morning next to Bellina, a talking chicken. So she wakes up and she's surrounded by sand, but she looks out and she can see greenery not far beyond. And so she figures maybe we're in Oz. And at no point is she ever like, what the fuck is happening here?
Well, she went to Oz before. Oh, but she is the chicken. So Bellina is talking to her.
Yes.
And that's what clues her into Oz, because she was talking to Bellina back in Kansas.
That's true. Bellina is the chicken that doesn't lay the egg.
But now they're in Oz, and all of a sudden Bellina's talking. And I completely forgot that there was a talking chicken in this movie. And she is by far my favorite part. She is hilarious.
Bellina's your favorite character?
Oh my gosh. So she's so funny, like her little running commentary. And at some point, I think Dorothy says, "How can you talk?" And she's like, "I don't know. How's my grammar?" She just has, she adds just these funny commentaries about what's going on. She's my favorite.
Okay. So Dorothy somehow figures out she's in the deadly desert. I'm not quite sure how she pieces all that together, but she does. And if you touch the sand,
You'll die.
the rocks have faces there. It's super freaky, but she manages to escape that situation. And this is when she and Bellina come upon a lunch pail tree. And I remember this moment so clearly. That was magic to me. A lunch pail tree? Are you kidding?
Right.
So we then see a rock face say, "Your Majesty, Dorothy has returned to Oz." We don't really know what that's about, but we're like, oh, something bad is about to go down. So Dorothy and Bellina go walking in search of Dorothy's old pals when they stumble upon Dorothy's old house destroyed by the tornado. And then Dorothy sees the destroyed yellow brick road. It's just like all torn up and she's panicked. She follows the yellow brick road to the Emerald City to find it in sort of like poorly animated ruins. There are parts of it that are clearly animated and they're supposed to look live action, but you're just like, oh, okay. So it's looking rough.
It's like when they use miniatures and it's not supposed to be miniatures, but you can tell.
Yeah.
It was the mid 80s, cut them some slack.
For sure. So there's graffiti that says, "Beware the Wheelers." We don't know what that means, but we're about to find out. So all the people have been turned to stone. Some of the stone statues have no heads. We will find out why later. We find the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion. They've also been turned to stone. And then, Katie, we hear the creaking noises, the same noises from the gurney.
Oh, I guess I didn't put that together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And with those noises, our childhood trauma returns. In an article by slashfilm.com about revisiting this masterpiece, writer Raphael Mortimer describes what happens next. He says, "Dorothy isn't greeted by munchkins, but by terrifying wheelers, a half-human, half-scooter cyberpunk gang," I loved that wear creepy helmets with faces, all while maniacally laughing.
Maniacally. Like, it's horrifying.
So scary.
It reminds me of A Clockwork Orange, except Disney-fied.
Okay, walk me through what this moment meant to you as a child.
I don't remember them in detail because I think they were so scary. They look very Medusa-esque. Like, I was thinking those were like snakes.
Yes, very Medusa looking, really scary. And they're all hunched over, right?
And they have this horrible look on their face. And it's like a Technicolor nightmare.
Oh my God, it is. So when I saw this in the theater, I immediately turned to my grandma and I said, "I want to leave." And my grandma's like, "Oh, honey, I'm sure. Like, it's okay. It's just a scary part. Like, whatever. It'll be fine." It's not fine, Grandma. It did not get better. I wanted to leave in 34 minutes and we should have left.
Right. That would have been the responsible adult thing to do.
Oh my. The Wheelers surround Dorothy and Bellina and they make a run for it, but they end up in a dead end. And there's a keyhole though. And Dorothy unlocks the keyhole with the Oz key.
Somehow the Oz key remained in her little apron pocket through a torrential storm, through a raging river.
This was my very note. How in the world did she manage to hold on to that key? Number one. Number two, I'm not trying to get all like electricity 101 on anybody, but she was going to have electroshock therapy while she had a metal key on her person, while she was on a metal gurney. This girl was not grounded.
No.
They were going to kill her.
In more ways than one.
Yes, true. So anyway, they escape. And this is when she discovers a metal machine. It's a soldier from the Royal Army of Oz that looks an awful lot like Rich Uncle Pennybags, like the mascot from Monopoly.
Yeah. And a little bit like Wilford Brimley.
The cocoon tie-in, yes. Totally. So after she winds him up, she learns his name is Tock. And he's there to serve. He wants to join Dorothy in finding out what happened.
The important thing to know about Tock is that he's all made of metal, sort of like the Tin Man, but he has to be wound up to work. He's actually part of Oz law enforcement, but he has 3 different winders. So one of them controls his thoughts, one of them controls his speech, and one of them controls his ability
Action.
to move. Yeah. So that's how she gets him to work. And this is very important at multiple points in the
Yes,
in the
and he
movie.
does say that he can't feel emotion. He's a machine.
Yes, but I have questions about that
As
later.
do I. Okay, so they escape the room. Tock is able to knock out the Wheelers, but not before grabbing one of them so Dorothy can ask him what in the world happened to the Emerald City. Dorothy finds out that the Gnome King conquered the Emerald City, and only Princess Mombi?
Mombi?
Mombi.
Mombi. Yeah, because
Mombi.
I was like, why?
Yeah, Mombi.
It sounds like mommy, but it's not. It's
I think it's
Mombi.
supposed to.
Oh, okay.
Princess Mombi knows. And so Dorothy and Tock are like, we're going to go to Mombi's place to find out what's going on. And, you know, they just let themselves into her palace, this like grand Liberace, fully mirrored, incredible palace that she lives in, right? Where this beautiful woman is like playing the mandolin or something.
Right.
She just yawns when they walk in. Help me rise. She's such a weirdo.
Yeah, she's super weird, but like youngish and like pretty and doesn't seem very menacing. She tells her, "Come with me. Your friends can stay here."
Right. And Dorothy's like, okay.
Any Gen X kid would be like, no.
It's a stranger danger.
No. We may keep our keys on us at all times, but we're not going with the strangers.
That's right. That was some true Gen X energy, keeping that Oz key on her.
Right.
Yes. It should have been around her neck.
Right.
So she leads her in to these glass cabinets that are filled with heads, like living heads.
Like, yeah, they're just hanging out there.
They look around. Their eyes
do.
move. They have expressions on their faces. And I think this is where I like full on blacked out as a kid. Like that really scared me. And that wasn't so far after the 34-minute mark from the Wheelers where I had told Grandma Mary we need to leave. No, it had gotten worse. Now we're in a space of, like, where's it going from here? What were your thoughts on that?
That part unnerved me, but then the scene later that we'll talk about again in that space was the one that just did me in. Like, even watching it as an adult, I was like, it's coming.
It's getting worse. But like also, now that I'm older, like, don't you wish you could just like kind of do that in the morning? Just like pick out a head?
Oh my gosh, just be like, look, your hair's all done and your makeup's done. Great.
Right.
Like,
seriously, we would be on time in the morning.
It seems like she also sort of clicks on the brain because at one point someone says like, oh, I think she forgot because she hasn't put that head back on since then. So that would be a little weird. You'd be very confused all the time.
You'd be different every day. There'd be a new version of you every day.
Right. Like, imagine if you really could do that. Like, how would you ever catch people for crimes?
That's very true. And also, you know, when people say like, I never know who I'm going to get. Different all the time. He's different every time I see him. I never know which version I'm going to get. Right. That would be very true.
That would be so true. Yeah. So let's just all be glad that our heads are firmly attached to our shoulders.
So Mombi tells Dorothy that the Gnome King took the scarecrow with him back to his mountain with the emeralds. Oh, and by the way, Cate, she really likes Dorothy's head. And she's like, you know what?
Oh, she's like, you have a nice head.
I like it. Like, I'm going to just like lock you in the tower for a few years until it's ready. It's ready.
And she says something to her. She says, like, you're not pretty, but like, you're interesting or something. It's just a weird thing to say. But yeah, she wants to like age her so she'll be the appropriate age to have her head.
And these are the heads of the women's statues.
Right, the dancing women with no heads.
Yes. Dorothy's now trapped in this dusty attic, and this Jack Skellington type character called Jack Pumpkinhead. They're both called Jack. Jack-o'-lantern. Jack Pumpkinhead calls out to her, and he tells her he's waiting for his mom. And again, Dorothy's just like completely unfazed by this. Like, oh, okay, a talking like whatever.
Right. I'm in Oz. It's fine.
It's fine. Dorothy helps put him back together, and we find out that Mombi brought him to life with some voodoo powder of life. Then he asks Dorothy if he can call her mom. It's weird.
I don't understand.
I know.
Like, is this supposed to say something, or is it just all over the place? Because like, what is the mom part? I don't understand.
I don't know. I feel like as elements of this story unfold, I feel like the writers were just like, oh, well, let's just write this in. Oh, and then they could be like this. And then, oh, this thing can move the plot along. Like there's no through line.
It's like Lost, that TV show. Like you can't, I went back once and watched it all, and they didn't know what they were talking. There was no final plan. They just threw whatever they wanted to do in the episode.
It was like spaghetti at a wall. That's what this film felt like.
Right. Oh, it's Oz. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So they all come up with a plan of how they're going to escape. It begins with Dorothy stealing this powder of life. That whole scene where she gets the key from Mombi's wrist, that was a nail biter. Yes. As a kid, that was really stressful to me.
Yeah. So Jack says to her, she says, where's the powder of life? And he says, it would be with her original head in cabinet 31.
34? I don't know.
And
don't trust us to escape.
Right. But anyway, but to do it, she has to get the key. There's a ruby key that she keeps around her wrist. And so she has to get the key in order to get to the heads.
That was scary.
It was. She's like carefully untying it.
Like Dorothy's Oz key was not even tied to her wrist.
Right.
So she retrieves the key.
She goes into the Hall of Heads, who are all sleepy. So they don't know that she's there.
Right.
So she goes and she opens cabinet 31. And there is the original head, which is not attractive. It's very just unpleasant looking. And all this other stuff is jammed in there, including a bottle that says the powder of life. So she has to like reach for it. And that it's right next to the head. And so she gets it. But as she's doing it, something shifts and the head wakes up and realizes what's happening and starts to scream. And then all the other heads wake up and start to scream.
Okay, but they don't just start to scream. They scream, Dorothy Gale.
Oh, is that what they're saying? Bodiless heads in cabinets screaming in the middle of the night? What?
Terrifying.
Terrifying. Like, did you just get up and leave the theater at that point?
I was 8 when I saw this movie. I'm like, Grandma Mary, please.
For the love of God.
Get me a gump and get me the fuck out of here. I need to escape. I was literally becoming a shell of my former self. I was shrinking into nothingness in that chair. It was so scary, Katie.
That is the part of that movie that has stuck with me.
Mombi wakes up and starts running through that palace headless.
Right. Why would you put that in a movie?
Disney magic.
It's an adventure.
So Dorothy runs back up to the attic where Jack and Tock are building that escape sled thing. And they put like the moose head or...
Wait, is this where she sees the little flash in the mirror that like leads her the right way?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so she sees this sort of like... It's hard to tell what it is. It's kind of like a blue flash. It's sort of like maybe looks like there's a person...
Like a fairy, like a Tinkerbell type something. Yeah.
And it like clues her in to like which way to go. And so she goes that way.
Yeah. And so they're putting this sled thing together that they call the gump. And Dorothy pours the powder on the head. It's a moose.
On all of it. It's a gump, which is some mythical Ozical creature.
Okay, Ozical.
And then they sprinkle the life powder on it so it comes to life.
It comes to life. And then just as Mombi like busts in the attic, they're able to fly out the window.
Yes, but not particularly well. They almost crash, but then at the last second, they come up.
So that is some true adventure. And it's a bumpy ride. And Mombi, meanwhile, in her full shimmery 80s makeup, she sits alone in the dark playing her mandolin when we see that fairy figure appear. Right. And this is when she says, Ozma, nobody's going to help you. Nobody knows where you are. Nobody's left who even knows you. This is the first time we're hearing Ozma.
Right. So this is where I have to share my story. So I hear this and I'm like, wait. So when I was 12, my mom died. She had brain cancer. Through our healthcare system, they had a whole hospice program. And so part of that hospice program was grief counseling. when you were 13, you got to go to the adolescent counseling. So my brother was older, so he got to go to the adolescent counselor. But because I was 12, I went to the children's counselor. And it was unfortunately a bad fit for me because I would have done better with the adolescent counselor. I just was a sophisticated 12-year-old. So like all of the therapy techniques felt very childish to me. But the counselor, she introduced herself and was like, "Oh, hi, I'm Ozma." And I was like, okay. And she was like, "Isn't that an interesting name? Like, do you know how I got my name?" And I was like, "No." She was like, "Well, my grandfather wrote The Wizard of Oz."
Wait, stop. What?
Right. And I was like, okay. It didn't mean a lot to me in that moment, but like I was going through some stuff. So when she says Ozma in this movie, I'm like, wait, is that true? And clearly I had trust issues because I don't think I believed her when I was 12. I think I thought she was like telling me that to like try and win me over. And so I'm like, wait. So of course I take to the interwebs and I'm reading along. It's going through and it's talking about L. Frank Baum, and his youngest son has his first grandchild. Ozma is like in her name. It's not her first name.
Okay.
But that's what he really wanted to call her. I think she went to nursing school, whatever. And I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And then all of a sudden it's like, and then later in life, she became a grief counselor for children.
Cate.
And I was like, what?
What the actual fuck?
Isn't that wild?
What? I'm speechless.
Like, it felt like this weird fever dream memory, right? Of like, that can't be a real thing. But yeah, yes, she was my grief counselor.
You literally have an L. Frank Baum tie-in.
Right, I'm like 2 degrees from L. Frank. I mean, he's dead now, but
weird.
Isn't that so weird?
I mean, let's just conclude the pod. Like, I can't compete with that from here.
I had a coworker once because, I just sometimes share random stories about my life. Like, I am friends with the daughter of the person who invented the microwave.
Yes.
And one of my coworkers once said, "You've either lived a really interesting life or you lie a lot."
So you're the one that no one can beat in 2 truths and a lie.
Oh my gosh, that is going to be like one of my new 2 truths and a lie.
It needs to be.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the gump has been flying all night and it's in rough shape and its ropes begin breaking.
Oh, you know what we forgot?
What?
Like laced throughout this, everyone in Oz has a really strong reaction to Billina the chicken. Everyone's like, a chicken? Chickens aren't allowed in Oz.
Oh, that's right.
Just hold on to that.
Yeah, but they don't tell us why.
No, they don't tell us why. We just know. And in fact, even when Mombi, Mom's whatever her name is. Banksy?
No.
Even when she's like going to warn the Gnome King, she says, "And I have to tell him about the chicken."
I kind of didn't really catch that, but you're right. Everyone's having a very visceral reaction to this chicken.
Clearly obsessed with the chicken.
So the sled thing just falls to pieces. They all go flying and they end up landing in the snow. Although Dorothy lands very conveniently sitting on the couch that fell in the snow.
Boop. That's lucky. Just like keeping that key in her pocket, man.
Exactly. They've landed on the Gnome King's mountain and the mountain begins to speak to them. And Dorothy politely introduces herself and asks for the release of the scarecrow. And the Gnome King is like, what if I don't want to? And she's like, well, I'm here with my army, so I'm prepared to do what I have to do.
Right.
He just laughs at her. And with that laughter, the mountain opens up and they all just sort of fall into the king's lair. And his voice reveals that the emeralds from the Emerald City were actually his. And the scarecrow was the one that took them.
Which we know is not true. The scarecrow would not do that.
No, of course not. And for a brief moment, Dorothy is reunited with the scarecrow, but then he's gone in a flash. And the Gnome King tells her that he has turned him into an ornament for his collection. Dorothy then approaches the Gnome King, which is like, it's a face built into a rock.
Right. It's a very claymation.
Yes. And she begins to cry. And the Gnome King begins to comfort her.
Right. He like has this like arm reach out. His little claymation arm reaches out to like pat her on the shoulder.
And is it just me, or does the Gnome King, his face look like the mask that Cece Bloom wears in O Industry in Peaches?
Oh, kind of.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It was giving me O Industry vibes. Yeah.
Oh, Industry.
So just then, Dorothy's pals appear, and the Gnome King suggests that they should play a little game.
But for some reason, am I wrong that Bellina is hidden in Jack's pumpkin?
Head.
Yeah.
Yes. Bellina is hiding in Jack's head.
So he doesn't know there's a chicken.
No. And she's very quiet. She's not like balking or anything. She's making no noise.
Yes. For like, and they seem to know for some reason that she has to be hidden. I don't know how they knew it, but they know.
Again, no through line. But yeah, she's hidden.
Right.
He wants them to play a little game. And he's like, you might just be able to get the scarecrow back with this game. So meanwhile, Mombi demands that the Wheelers take her to the Gnome King. Back with the Gnome King, he tells them they each get 3 guesses as to which ornament is the scarecrow. And if they guess right, they'll get him back.
Right. If they touch it and say Oz and it's the scarecrow, boom. But there's some risk involved. He doesn't talk about what the risk is.
He doesn't tell them. He's not giving them the full rules, which is really unfair.
But also, why enter into a contract if you don't know all the details? Just saying.
The devil is in the details. Contracts 101.
Right.
The Gump goes first, and he makes his guesses, and he fails.
Right. There's like a loud boom. And then we learn the Gump is now an ornament.
Jack goes next. And he fails. Poof, he's now part of the ornament collection. So after it's Tock's turn to go in, the Gnome King, who is by now a freestanding like rock man.
Right. Like as each one of these like poofs into an ornament, he like becomes more and more human-like. Can we also talk about the claymation hands that like open up the wall for them to pass through? Very scary.
Very scary. This is when the Gnome King reveals to Dorothy that he's actually wearing the ruby slippers.
Which is the weirdest, like, unexpected turn in the work because he's very excited about his ruby slippers.
Like this rock man, very masculine,
right?
Reveals he's wearing these red ruby slippers with giant bows on them.
With giant bows, and he kind of like clicks the toes together, like, look at my ruby slippers. I thoroughly enjoyed this scene. I found it just charming as hell, but it was
a look
so unexpected.
Oh my God, it was so funny. And he tells her, I got these ruby slippers here when they fell out of the sky after you left Oz. He says the ruby slippers are what made it possible for him to conquer the Emerald City. So basically it's Dorothy's fault.
It's Dorothy's fault. You did this.
You did this. Also, the Gnome King has the same face as the electroshock therapy doctor. It's the same guy.
Oh, is Mombi with her original head the nurse?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because that's also how Wizard of Oz is, right? Like there's like a mean lady in town and she is the
witch.
Wicked witch. Yeah.
It's exactly right. So Tock plays dead.
Right, like he froze before his third choice.
Right.
He's not working because she has to wind him up.
This is a ploy to get Dorothy back there into the chamber to, quote, wind him up.
He was faking.
As Dorothy approaches, the Gnome King tells her, you know what, Dorothy? I can send you home without any memory of Oz. All I have to do is click my heels. Like, are you up for it? And she's like, no, I can't. It would mean forgetting about my friends. And I'm like, Dorothy, you're 11, 12. I don't know how old she is.
Right. How old is she supposed to be?
I don't know. I get it. You love your friends from Oz, whatever. But like, I love my friends too. But if I was in this situation with the Gnome King and it's scary as hell, I'd be like, take me home. Later, guys.
But all her friends were turned into ornaments.
I mean...
And she might be able to save them.
But she also might not. She might end up an ornament.
Probably I would be like, okay, I'm out of here. But like, I would like to think that my literary self would be like, I'm going to save them.
So like the heroine version of yourself would make that choice. I mean, sure.
The protagonist version of myself.
Okay, all right. Did you know, though, Disney had to pay MGM a big old chunk of money to use the ruby slippers. I'm like, did they use the original slipper? I'm like, what? Or did they own the rights to
Like the concept of ruby slippers? Trademark.
exactly like the intellectual property? Was the IP protected by MGM? I don't really know. Unclear.
I don't know, because I wondered that too. Like they had the rights to the book, and like the Scarecrow and the Tin Men, right? Like they looked different. They were kind of a cartoonish version of what was in the movie, and like the Cowardly Lion was just a lion.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like, did they have to like dance around some of the things? But how can you dance around ruby slippers?
I guess you can. So anyway, they paid him a shit ton of money. That was part of that big budget that they didn't see.
Yeah. We're so shocked this movie didn't do well.
That was a rough return on investment. So Dorothy realizes TikTok's master plan. She's in there while TikTok makes his final guess.
Because he tells her, like, I thought maybe if I'm wrong and you see what I'm turned into, then that might help you. That might give you a clue.
Yes. So he hugs Dorothy and cries. And I'm like, TikTok, you're a machine. You said at the beginning of this film, before it all got really dark, that you couldn't feel emotion. And he cries.
Right. And then and here you are crying. Green tears, by the way. Like cool, like antifreeze.
Coolant. Yes, like antifreeze tears. Yes. TikTok botches that guessing game. He's transformed into some object. So now we're down to Dorothy, last man standing, right? It's all up to her. And she sets her sights on an urn and she touches it and she shouts out, Oz, but she's wrong. She takes another guess on like a crystal formation. She's wrong again. She's down to her last guess. Meanwhile, Mombi busts into the Gnome King's chambers and tells him all about Dorothy. But of course, like he already knows. So we're back in the chamber and Dorothy closes her eyes. She's here to let her heart lead her to the correct object, right? Her final guess. And she's sticking out her arms with her eyes closed. I'm like, you're going to break some shit, Dorothy. It leads her to some like bird figurine, but then she opens her eyes and she sees what's next to it. It's this like 100 carat emerald, right?
It's huge.
It's huge. It's green. It's an emerald. Personally, I think this is the obvious guess. And I think if she or any one of her friends had actually taken the time to really look around all the treasures in there, they probably would have chosen it too.
Right.
Everything else is like
gold, silver, black. Yeah.
And then you've got this giant emerald. Like, hello.
It's like a paperweight made of a huge emerald.
Yes. She puts her hands on it and says, Oz. And a green flash appears and the Scarecrow King is there. They embrace. So now, of course, the Gnome King is super pissed. Dorothy and the Scarecrow begin looking for other green ornaments to see if they can transform their friends back. They're able to get the gump back. The gnome is getting increasingly angry. Because with this, is he like losing his human power?
Yeah, like as she's like undoing these ornaments, he is turning back into a rock.
Yes, okay. This is when the Gnome King decides to imprison Mombi for letting Dorothy escape and causing all of these problems. Like,
right, because he's like, now it's all your fault. You were supposed to fix this.
He then brings about this like earthquake and all the ornaments start falling and breaking. And the Scarecrow's able to salvage a green vase and they're able to bring Jack back. On Reddit, someone said, to this day, whenever I see something green and clear glass, I touch it and I say, Oz, quietly to myself.
Well, also, the way that she says Oz every time is so peculiar. Like, she's like, Oz, Oz, Oz. She's like screaming it.
So I'm going to start doing that. Shiny, green, glass, Oz. Okay. So the Gnome King now looms very large with like fire and brimstone behind him. And he makes all of the rubble around them start to come alive, right?
Yeah.
So they can't escape.
Right. Every time they try to escape, there's like stone gargoyles in their way.
Yeah, it's like really scary. And these are some kind of janky special effects. This is where things get real claymation animation. Yeah, I mean, for sure. The king picks up the pumpkin head right?
Yes.
This is clearly a case of miniatures.
Right. Well, no, first he picks up, he's trying to get the gump. And so he picks up the gump, but everything comes loose. So all he gets is the couch and he swallows the couch.
Right. And then he picks up the pumpkin head to eat him, unaware that silent Bellina is inside. But right on schedule, Bellina finally decides to lay an egg. It's not an egg that she can lay in Kansas, mind you.
No, she hasn't been able to lay an egg this whole time. But then she's like, oh, finally laid my egg.
Right. She lays her egg, and not only is the egg poisonous to gnomes, which is highly convenient.
Right. This is why chickens are not allowed.
So we learned that that's the reason why. They never tell us.
No.
But it's very convenient for Dorothy and the gang because this egg destroys the Gnome King.
It just
he just
from the inside out. He's just done. And he's like, an egg? Eggs are poison. And so he drops Jack.
No, he lovingly and slowly places Jack down.
Yes. Kind of floated to the ground.
Yeah.
That's right.
Dorothy then spots the ruby slippers and she hurries to put them on as the cave begins to just crumble and disintegrate. And so she quickly asks, now that she's wearing the ruby slippers, that the Emerald City and all of its people are restored to life. And so it is, Cate, it happens, and so it shall be. They realize, though, Tock is still missing.
Right.
But on the Gump's antlers, they see this green, like a metal.
Yeah.
And, she's like, Oz. And Tock.
Oz!
You're right. Oz. Tock is restored. So in the very next scene, there's a royal parade in Oz, and it's grand and it's spectacular. And the Tin Man looks very fake and tin. He does not look. And Mombi is escorted through this parade in a cage. Right. She's a prisoner now of Oz. And the whole Oz family wants to appoint Dorothy as the Queen of Oz, but she tells them, I love you, but I can't. I have to go back home. And she's really sad because she loves them all so much and she wishes she can be in both places, but she can't. Behind her in the mirror is that girl in the dress who rescued her at the hospital. This is Ozma, you guys. This is Ozma, that figure. Dorothy helps the girl step through the glass and come to life. So this is Ozma. And this is when Jack yells out, Mom!
Right.
So we learn that Ozma is the rightful queen and ruler of Oz and Cate's grief counselor when she was 12 years old.
Right. Who knew? But what's interesting is that I would have seen this movie 4 years before and never in my brain did and I only saw it once. So
you were going through some shit.
And right. I had a rough couple of years leading up to
the fact that her name was Ozma plays so secondary to the fact that there was
so much other stuff. Right.
Heads screaming and wheelers and
but it's so weird.
Weird. We learned that Mombi had enchanted Ozma into the mirror when she tried to scare her out of the city. And Dorothy then puts the ruby slippers on Ozma's feet where they belong. And she does ask her to wish her back to Kansas.
Yes.
And Ozma's like, okay, I agree on the condition that I'll look in on you, Dorothy, from time to time. And if you ever wish to come back to Oz, it will be granted. And so we're like, cool, win-win. This is working out for everyone, right? So then Ozma, that asshole Ozma, just taps the slippers 3 times. And Dorothy's like, wait, I wasn't ready to go. We're having a party. I have to say goodbye.
Also, Bellina decides to stay, which I support because if she didn't lay enough eggs in Kansas, they were going to chop off her head.
I also support it because it means that a gnome king can never come back to life as long as Bellina is there.
This is a good point.
Yes. So Dorothy is in this frantic rush to say goodbye to her friends because that bitch Ozma is just get out of here, Dorothy. Let me rule Oz and let's get on. And Dorothy's crying goodbye.
I think it was probably more we're already at 2 hours on this movie, so chop chop.
We then find Dorothy. She wakes up by a creek back in Kansas, and Toto finds her. Toto.
Yes. Toto.
And soon Uncle Henry and the rest of the search party comes running, and Auntie Em hugs her and tells her that the clinic had been struck by lightning during the storm. It burned the hospital down to the ground. Everyone was able to escape except for the doctor, who ran back in to get his machines.
Yep. Well, there you go.
Dumbass. A police buggy rides by with the head nurse inside.
Yep.
In the very last scene, we finally see the house getting finished by Uncle Henry, who's not so lazy anymore. He's not depressed.
Right.
And in her finished bedroom, Dorothy goes to the mirror and calls for Ozma, and she appears with Bellina in her arms. Dorothy goes to call Auntie Em, like, Auntie Em, look what's in the mirror.
Come look, it's real.
And Ozma motions, shh, don't tell, it's a secret. And Auntie Em then comes in and tells Dorothy, you know what? It's a beautiful day outside. Why don't you go and play? And then we see Dorothy go outside into the sunshine. All is restored in Kansas.
The end.
This film, it received really mixed reviews, as you can probably imagine. Yes. Some really loved it because it apparently remained very faithful to the Oz books. But Roger Ebert called it, quote, a complete disaster. Gene Siskel said, quote, rarely has a movie been created that seems so pointed to frustrate the reasonable expectations of the audience. This was marketed to children.
And marketed it as a return to Oz, right? So you're expecting it to be
cinematic candy, like the other article said. Yes.
Yeah, I concur. I don't often agree with Siskel and Ebert, but like, I'm going to concur with that idea. Like, I feel like now if they marketed it, they would be like, what if in a world where Oz has been taken over by the Gnome King?
Right. And we would all be like, yes. In a post-pandemic world, we'd be like, sure. We watched some dark shit now. We've been through some times.
Yep.
Tyler McCready, in a piece he wrote for Colander, he says, surprisingly somber and often unnerving, Return to Oz rejects the over-the-rainbow optimism of its predecessor. There are no songs here. No characters with secret desires for wisdom or courage or love. No desire to return home. Instead, director Walter Murch and screenwriter Gil Dennis focus on the odd possibilities of Oz, on the power struggles that might break out between its native occupants. There's no place like home. One of the most memorable lines from the Judy Garland version is uttered only once by a villain with murderous intent. One could never mistake Return to Oz for an homage. I don't think it set out to be an homage, but we as an audience were very much expecting that. It's called Return to Oz. So it doesn't say Return to Oz novels.
Right. And it doesn't say Return to Oz in an inappropriate way for children.
I think it was sort of a bait and switch.
Yeah. I feel like they were counting on the popularity of The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
To buoy them through this $28 million budget.
Yes.
But then again, like I said, like word got out and it was like, if you like The Wizard of Oz, stay away from this movie.
Yes, I can see both sides. They were perfectly within their right to make this film and to make it true to the original Oz novels. Okay. Yeah. They were well within their right to do that. But at the same time, there is a societal expectation from a film that came out, I don't know, what did I say, 1939? I mean, this is a part of American culture. The MGM, Judy Garland film, it's optimism, it's technicolor, it's hope.
Right. It's heartwarming. It's all of these things that this movie is not. And I feel like if you are going to take an American iconic treasure and mess with it, that's fine. But then you need to make it really clear. You need to not just be like a Disney adventure. Right. I mean, it's just its own thing. And I mean, it's not even that I dislike it. Like, it's interesting.
Even as an adult, some of the scenes are kind of scary still, but it is a good time. If you knew what you were getting into.
It's a romp.
It's a romp on a gump. If you knew what you were getting into, you would enjoy it so much more. The Return to Oz was a good time. We knew what we were going to get.
Right. We were expecting terror and icky
trauma.
things. And yeah. So like we were prepared. But like as 8 and 9-year-old children, no, we were not prepared. And it was terrifying. So yeah. It's just such an interesting, sometimes I think about all of the people that go into making a movie, right? I think about this like for TV shows and movies when they're really bad. And I think, do you know how many people had to sign off on this?
Oh yeah, this was greenlit.
Going forward. How many people were like, yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, it was enjoyable, but
if you know what you're getting into.
If you know what to expect.
Yes. And okay, I mean, I shit all over the visual effects on this thing, but I mean, it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Visual Effects in 1986. It did lose. And like I told you, Katie, Reddit has a lot of feelings about this film. So
sure.
I found some, I thought we could talk about them. So someone said, the Wheelers were nightmare fuel for years for me as a child.
Yeah, I mean, they are nightmarish. And this is the other thing, because did you notice, like, they weren't very good on their wheels, right? Like, they were, like, clumsy and all over the place. And I would love to know what it was like to have to do that as the actor.
I know. I was like, are these people, like, acrobats?
Right? Because they're also, like, unnaturally raised up. Like, it looked like they were probably holding, like, that their feet and arms were extended by something to reach the wheels.
Yes, they were hunched over. Like, it was, really scary.
Ugh.
I know. Someone said, I once watched Return to Oz coming off 16 hits of acid. Life-altering experience. Highly recommend.
Okay, how could you take 16 hits of acid?
I don't know. I don't understand acid well enough to have feelings about that. It just seems like a lot of acid.
Like, one hit of acid, shrooms, even without any, like, it is like an acid trip.
Yeah, the film itself is an acid trip.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
16 hits? How is he alive to write that sentence on Reddit?
I don't even know what to make of that.
Okay.
Like, that's like...
We're calling bullshit on that.
I don't know.
Okay. Someone said, I watched this as a kid and thought it was some sort of fever dream. It was so wild. It wasn't until after I was in my 30s, I found out it was actually a real movie.
Same seas.
Yes. When people ask me, what is the scariest movie? I say this one. Truly fucked with my head when I was a kid.
Right. Freddy Krueger has nothing on this movie.
Nothing.
We knew what we were getting into with Freddy Krueger. We were not expecting it with Return to Oz.
No, and even Child's Play, right? About a doll. We were children who played with dolls. We knew it was an evil doll. We knew what we were getting into. This?
This, we thought we were just going to go down a yellow brick road with some friends.
Someone else said, this is some Dark Souls shit, which...
Yes.
But my favorite comment of all was, you ever wonder how you would have turned out if you hadn't seen certain movies? Yeah, this movie was one of those for me. And I think about that all the time. As an 8-year-old with my Grandma Mary in the movie theater, my life would have been very different had I not seen this movie.
Right. I don't think it had quite the same effect on me as it did on you, but those parts just stuck with me.
If you haven't seen this film, it's available on Disney+. I do encourage a rewatch. If you have young children, maybe not the film for them.
Not with them.
No.
Just let them be.
Yeah. So like all in all, we're saying thumbs up, but with caution.
I mean, thumbs up, but know what you're getting into. If you are less than Gen X and you've never seen this movie, proceed with caution.
Yeah, this is a cautionary tale, but like still a really good time. I loved it.
It's just good. It's just like there's something fun about it.
Unnervingly entertaining.
Yes.
Hey, let us know. Hit us up in the comments. Let us know what you think about Return to Oz and that cabinet of heads and the Wheelers and all of the things, because we want to know.
We want to know how you were traumatized by it as children. Share all the details.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us. If you're enjoying the pod, we invite you to rate and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
You can find us on the socials and the web at theuntitledgenxpodcast.com. We hope you keep in touch, beautiful people. Bye.
Bye.